call to
We'll
order
talk, yeah.
the November 20th, 2024 meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission being held in the Don B. Griffin Room at Harwich Town Hall. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting. Participation is possible in person and online. Instructions for logging in online can be found on the meeting agenda, which is posted on the Town of Harwich website. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First on the agenda, we have 3 items for discussion and possible vote. The first item is discussion and possible vote to accept holding a conservation restriction on 2.24 acres of land at 0 Route 28, map 35, parcel E5. Good evening. Yes, please.
Good evening, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Kelly Grant. I'm a land protection specialist with the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust, representing the Harwich Conservation Trust for this item to present to you this conservation restriction on the property at 0 Route 28, map 35, parcel E5. So this is a conservation restriction called the Red River Valley North Conservation Restriction. It's a 2.24 acre area that is part of a larger 2.74 acre property. That property is again part of the larger Red River Valley Preserve owned by the Harwich Conservation Trust, which spans a 12.34 acre area north and south of Route 28. In the spring of 2024, the Harwich Town Meeting voted to support the acquisition of the property by Harwich Conservation Trust for the purpose of protecting the public scenic view along State Highway Route 28, protecting public drinking water supply, protecting important state-designated wildlife habitat, and protecting the health of the Red River Valley watershed. The property the subject of this CR will be owned by Harwich Conservation Trust, and the conservation restriction would be granted to the Conservation Commission. The conservation restriction that's been provided to you outlines the ecological values, prohibited and permitted acts and uses, public access, and the legal description of the premises. And so we're asking for you this evening to vote to accept and sign that conservation restriction, and also asking for you to consider recommending the Select Board approval of the conservation restriction through a letter of support. So I'm happy to answer any questions, assuming you want to take them one at a time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from these 2 things.
Thank you. Amy.
For the first item, the conservation restriction, 0 Route 28, that 2.24 acres, I recommend that you hold the restriction. Town meeting supported the acquisition of this, and the restriction will offer double protection. And I have no further questions.
Questions or comments from commissioners? Vivian?
Am I voting on this since I?
Yep. Yeah, you can vote on it.
No questions.
Sophia?
No questions.
I have no questions or comments. Do we have any comments from the public? In the room or online? I hear none. Can we have a motion?
I'll move for acceptance of the conservation restriction as stated.
Second.
Discussion? So I'd just like to amend the motion to include signing the support letter to, the request is to have a support letter to the select board, so.
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, thank you.
I'll have you all sign this after, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
But the next one, if they,
Okay, next we have discussion and possible vote to send a support letter to the select board to allow Orenda Wildlife Land Trust to hold a conservation restriction on a .84 acre property located at 0 Birch Drive that is owned by the Harwich Conservation Trust.
So again, for the record, my name is Kelly Grant, Land Protection Specialist with the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trusts. In this instance, I am representing the Compact. This is a 0.84 acre property that is a key remaining parcel in a greater 1,000 acre protected open space area spanning the towns of Harwich and Brewster, providing numerous walking trails and passive recreational opportunities for the public. The property is designated as priority habitat of rare endangered species and biomap rare species core habitat for the eastern box turtle. And the property is also designated as Zone 2 wellhead protection area, critical to maintaining public drinking water supply. So again, the conservation restriction outlines the ecological values, prohibited and permitted acts, uses, and public access and legal description of the premises. And when we submitted the request, we didn't have the final approval from the state, but we did receive that afterwards, so you have a copy of the final conservation restriction that was approved by the state. I just wanted to make one correction on the agenda. It actually says that the property is owned by Harwich Conservation Trust. This property is actually owned by the Compact, and
Yep.
the conservation restrictions being granted to Orenda Wildlife Land Trust. So that's just a correction to that to include in the vote. So for this conservation restriction, we're requesting your consideration of recommending the select board approval of the conservation restriction through a letter of support.
Thank you. Amy?
recommend that you approve the letter of support which we have provided you. You will not be holding this restriction. It is simply a letter showing support to the select board that you recommend this.
Thank you. Comments from commissioners? Sophia? Mark? Vivian? I have no comments. Any comments from the public or questions? Online or in the room? Hearing none, can we have a motion?
I will move to send the support letter to the select board regarding the aforementioned presentation.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
So next, we have an update on the local comprehensive plan.
Let me get the chairman, or, sorry, not the chairman,
Thank you.
Mr. Colton. Mr. Chair, could you sign that letter, please? So she can have it for tomorrow. Thank you. That way, it's done. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Barbara Nickerson. I'm a member of the local planning committee who is providing the update on the local comprehensive plan. With me is Christine Flynn, our town planner. Appreciate the time tonight to just visit a little bit about where we're going with the plan and what our time schedule is. And also Jeff Handler's our liaison from the select board tonight on the update on the comprehensive plan also. I believe that you were given the link to look at the plan, and I appreciate the comments about Amy and John you both provided earlier today. Great comments. We will be sending them to our consultants at Ty and Bond this week to get things going. What we did is that I think most of you are aware of we had several options, several things that we did to get opinions from folks throughout, both residents, non-residents, as well as tourists over the summer months. We had postcard surveys, we sent out the full-blown monkey survey to residents and non-residents, that homeowners in the area. And then we had, I think, 4 different town meeting type of situations where we had things set up at the community center and at the 204 to get input from people on the various things like community, village character, environmental issues, housing issues, and that type of thing. And I just want you to know that the 2 top items that people brought up, no matter where they were from, was that they were concerned about overdevelopment of Harwich, and that our environmental and natural resources are the most imperative thing that we preserve, and didn't want them impacted and stuff. So as far as our time schedule, we're hoping to have all of the comments from all of the commissions and the departments within Harwich to the consultant by the end of December. Hoping to get another draft from them by mid to late January. Correct me if I'm wrong on those times. And at that point, it will go through the town and to the select board. And the game plan is to have the local comprehensive plan, hopefully will be approved at town meeting in May. For those of you that have not had a chance to read it yet, and you have comments, please feel free to send them to either Amy or to Christine Flynn, as I said, our town planner, and we can get them into to the consultant to get things addressed and stuff in there. I think it's a great plan. As you know, the housing production plan has just been approved by the planning board. The open space and recreation plan is going before the committee also for their approval. That all feed into the comprehensive plan, and hopefully our comprehensive plan will be able to give us guidance for the next 10 years that we're looking at for where we all want Harwich to go. So, any questions or thoughts, comments?
We can start with Amy if you have.
Sure. Well, I did send your comments today, and a lot of it wasn't corrections, it was more so elaborations on some things and some clarifications, and just some additions of what I thought were
Absolutely.
potentially pertinent items to put in here. So, no, I think it's a great draft, and I have, other than what I've sent you, and again, more clarifications than anything, I have no comments on it. Nice job.
Thank you.
Wayne?
Nothing.
Vivian?
Nothing right now.
Nothing?
Sophia?
And I got your comments also.
Right.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Well, thank you all for your time, and we appreciate
Yep.
it. And, you know, this is a 10-year comprehensive plan that will help the town of Harwich, and I think it will have really provide a lot of guidance and for the town as we address our open space and conservation issues, our environmental issues for water quality, as well as affordable and attainable housing and other economic development and transportation matters. So this is very exciting for us.
Great, thank you. Well, let's see if there are any comments or questions in the room or online about conservation interests in the local comprehensive
Right.
plan. Well, hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have a notice of intent for 11 River Bend Road, map 1, parcel G1-9, for replacement of an existing wooden bulkhead, the installation of floats with scallop growing nets, and dredging at the base of the bulkhead to allow for scallop growing nets to remain submerged at low tide. Salt marsh restoration is also proposed in eroded areas. This is a continuance from September 5th of this year.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dave Crispin with the BSC Group, Civil Engineer and Land Surveyor. Nice to be back. The applicants, Dan and Jeff, are in the front row here. And I think we're finally here to get down to the nitty-gritty on our bulkhead. Everybody knows where this is, I think. It's right there on Herring River. And I apologize, there's a lot of moving pieces in this. So I tried to put it together to summarize all of the documents that you have in front of you. So let's start. If I push the button to the right, there we go. This is an interesting, it's a little sidebar, but it's an interesting one. This is the site about 1940, just based on a postcard of the area. What's interesting where that yellow arrow is the existing bulkhead that we're talking about. It's also interesting that it comes in front of the house next door. And we believe that that bulkhead that we're replacing was built at the same time as the one next door. The one next door has been replaced. When they replaced it, they didn't go to the property line, they went up to the edge. So that explains why the gap is there. Part of it is the original bulkhead, part of it's the replacement bulkhead, the new metal one to the left. But it was all built by the same person, we think. So that kind of explains why we've got this little gap in between. What does a upweller look like? And I know it's been commented about, we called these floats for a long time, and you can blame the engineer for that one. As we've learned a little bit from our client and from other similar applications in other towns, these really are a piece of farm equipment. They're not a float. And I think the best definition of a farm equipment is a combine, something that harvests wheat, something like that. That's a piece of farm equipment. But if you put it on the road, it's got four wheels, it's got an engine, it's got a driving and a steering wheel, sounds like a truck. Different registration, different operation, different driver's license, if you need one for farm equipment, different type of fuel. And I think what we're dealing with here is a piece of farm equipment. And that's why we changed this to an upweller, is why we called it. And there's lots of different upwellers. Some of them have pumps, some of them are manual. This is strictly in the water, but it does the same thing. It grows shellfish. And what does it look like? That little picture on the right, which is a little tough to see here, shows the fineness of the nets that are underneath here. They're big enough so that a half or 3/4 inch scallop doesn't escape. What does the plan look like? And I know you know we've been in front of the Waterways Commission a number of times. The red line is where the existing bulkhead is. So you can see most of this work is landward of that. And that's partly because that bulkhead has failed. There's been erosion behind that. Salt marsh is washed in, the sand is washed in. But it's wiggled to something like this. The floats that are on the top right of that were after many discussions with the Waterways Commission to make this a viable project for the applicant. We got rid of all the floats down at the bottom half, which was part of the width of the river and all of that information. So they were happy and they recommended approval for this. Just as a comment, we did reduce the number of piles from 22 down to 12 for this new configuration. And as we will talk about a little bit, these will be year-round platforms. I think everybody understood that, and I'll try to explain that in a minute. There we go. And just so you can see what this is, the green area is existing floats that are out there now. The lighter yellow is the floats that are behind the existing seawall, and the kind of mustard color are the new floats that are actually in the current water body. And that's just for general information. I know you've got a bylaw that talks about 200 square feet, so we kind of looked at what's that square footage in the water now, and it nets out at 321 square feet. So, that's the project. I think hopefully everybody has a general understanding of what we want to do here. Replace the bulkhead and put the upwellers in. And we had written letters on 3 different variance items. One of them is the what we're considering unavoidable impacts to the resource areas, the 200 square foot float limit, and you'll note that's in quotes there, and the seasonal float. You guys have a lot of bylaws. Every town does. And I know zoning doesn't affect you per se, but this is a permitted use by right, aquaculture. You also have the right to farm bylaw in town, which gives a landowner the right to farm. Aquaculture is defined in part of that. And in your own wetlands bylaw, you define aquaculture, but unfortunately, there are no performance standards for that, so here we are. The zoning bylaw, as I said before, is a permitted use by right. And they define aquaculture quite clearly as being an art and a science to raise shellfish under controlled conditions. That's what we're doing here. Farming shall include harvesting and aquaculture processes. So those two are in the background. This is a permitted use by right. The wetlands bylaw, you also have a definition on aquaculture. It's a little bit different, but it just omits the words under controlled conditions. I think we all understand what we're trying to do here. Now, here comes the upweller versus the float discussion. When we looked at the other communities, some of them had float definitions, some of them didn't. But we looked carefully at the float definition. And it's defined as a structure so that people may access the water. My interpretation on that is it's meant to be residential in nature. People have a house, they have a dock, they have a float, they get on their boat and they go. I don't think it's targeted at aquaculture. Because your bylaw says no more than 200 square feet, and it says they have to be removed seasonally. Unfortunately, seasonally really isn't well defined in anybody's regulations. So we're not sure how to deal with that. But we don't believe they are floats applicable under this bylaw because they don't provide access to the water. Remember, everything that's going to be harvested out of these is going to be from a boat on the water already. Nobody's climbing up on the bulkhead and marching onto the land. No land connection there. It's all in the water. So just on that alone, we think they fail to meet the definition of a float under the Harwich wetlands regulations. I will comment under the waterways, water dependent use regulations, they actually use the word that a float includes moorings. You must have a boat moored on your float. So even that section of the bylaw has a little different definition, but it doesn't line up with aquaculture. So that's kind of where we're going with this. And Amy did have a couple questions that we'd like to respond to. This was an exciting one. You made me smile. Shellfish excrement, is it significant? Our resident expert, Dan here, tells me that they've actually done studies on this.
It was more of a just a question rather than.
It's a fair question. I wouldn't have thought of it, but that's okay. But the bottom line is there's a lot of movement here.
Yep.
And I didn't know this, but pseudo feces floats. So it's not going to accumulate. And it may even increase the benthos and increase denitrification process through that. So that was for you, Amy.
Thanks.
The mitigation question, I think we're doing everything we can do for mitigation. We're certainly stabilizing that existing escarpment, which is right behind the existing rotten bulkhead. This is going to preserve the salt marsh. And I know there's been correspondence that says if we put it in there, we're going to kill the salt marsh in the back. If you go back into some of the letters that were submitted to you folks in the waterways, I think by putting this up, we're going to preserve that salt marsh. We're not going to impact it at all. And my reasoning is if you go back 70 or 100 feet back, there's salt marsh back there. And it's been behind a bulkhead since the 1930s. So, and that marsh has grown all the way out. It's a man-made marsh, by the way. I hope you understand that. That was all filled in the 1930s. It's not natural. But if the water can get way back there and support a salt marsh, the fact that we're gonna seal it back up again, it's still gonna come in through the cove and back in and not have a detrimental impact to the salt marsh. In fact, we're gonna refill that hole in the back and plant salt marsh in there. And there's 510 square feet of that. The applicant has offered to provide a solid seeding program with the shellfish warden. I think that's in the way. And one of the few benefits, I've never seen this done before, is that there will actually be a nitrogen removal from the bay to the tune of about 100 pounds of nitrogen per year. That's a big thing. Nitrification Title V has been rewritten completely because of this. They have fertilizer programs to fight this. This is about the only thing you can physically do to take it out of the water. So that's where that is. So if you agree that this thing is not afloat, then we don't need the variances, but I want to walk you through if you decide that you think we still need the variances. You have I call this an analogous standard. You don't have a standard for how high a float should be above the floor, but you do have one for a walkway over a salt marsh. And a walkway over a salt marsh says if you put the deck and you have 3/4 inch spacing in it, the sun will go through the float or the deck, and the salt marsh underneath it will grow. So that's kind of an analogous standard. It also says that if the deck is 1.5 times the width of the thing above the salt marsh, again as an analogous standard, then that meets that idea of a salt marsh over, a deck over a salt marsh. This is that in a formula sense. At an average tide, we're about 1.4 times the height of the width of that, which to me means it's better than 1.25, which is what the analogous standard says. So I think we are letting light through just by building the deck instead of out of 1x6s, 2x2s, or 1x2s with the 3/4 inch space across. We can do that very easily. This doesn't show up too well, but maybe in the one that you're looking at is a little better. This is the sun angle at 10 o'clock in the morning in the summer solstice and in the winter solstice. So you get a different angle. And as you can see by the yellow line at the bottom, most of the bottom of that upweller is lit. And sunlight doesn't go straight through the water, it bends, and that's why that has that little angle in there. So we think, and this is all getting towards the year-round process of it being there, is the impact of it. In this situation, we can let the light through, and we think the natural sunlight coming in from the angle will do that. This is the idea we're using 1x2 decking. You can see all the spaces, and I can't really read that number, but there's a number of square feet. I think it's about 85% closed and 15% open. If you were here during this solar eclipse a few months back there, I was planting my garden out there with the solar eclipse, and it was pretty bright. And that was at a 92%, I think, eclipse. There was only 7 or 8% of the sun showing. So I think if we're 15% of that getting through here, I don't think we're gonna have a sunlight penetration issue. So, if you find the variances are requested, I'm almost done here. The platforms are permitted under zoning and the right to farm. They're only accessed by the water, and they're not used for recreational vehicles. We need to have year-round deployment on these upwellers because the scallop season, your regulations talk about removing the thing for the season, is year-round. Different variations, but the scallop season is year-round. We talked about the sunlight penetration, and the seasonal thing in the harbor management plan seems to describe the fishing season. And the seasons for payment on moorings and the seasons for this. This removal or seasonal use is not well defined in the regulations at all. One of the season items that I saw was regarding the payment of electricity bills at a docking at the marina. So there's different seasons for different things. We have an application that is year-round. It really needs to be a year-round thing. So I guess we're asking the commission either say, yeah, we don't think you need those variances, and we agree, or if you think we do, this is your justification. And that's what all of those papers that we submitted to you were. The navigability of the river, we went through with the Waterways Commission. We think we made it better. They're happy with that. We're going to protect the coastline from the failing structure. We're going to restore the salt marsh behind it. The scallops, as we talked about, provide nitrogen removal. Another thing hidden in your bylaw, it talks about the floats being removed, if you want to call it a float. Only applies in fresh water, in my read. Literal enforcement's certainly a hardship. This is a very expensive project for these guys to repair this. And to make some funding back on the scallop farming helps pay for the bulkhead. And in my mind, in my opinion, there's no substantial detriment to the public or no nullification of the intent of the bylaw. I think we meet the performance standards, and that's kind of where we're at. If you would like, I know there was, why is my thing not working here? Because I have a couple of notes. Let's save this. I think the attorney, I don't know if she's here or not, she's gonna have a few comments, but I do have rebuttals to those. I don't have them submitted, but I do have verbal ones.
So I think what we're gonna do now, I'm assuming some of the people in the room have things to say, but before we get to that, and including the attorney's rebuttal here, we're gonna go through the normal course of things. I'm gonna ask for Amy's comments, and then we're gonna give commissioners a chance to comment and/or ask questions, and then we can get to other input from the public. So let's start with Amy.
Thank you. So first, before we talk about variances and everything like that, I just want to take it back to the resource areas that we're dealing with here. So we have salt marsh, we have land under the ocean, we have land containing shellfish as, and then some, well, no, land subject to coastal storm flowage wouldn't be, because this is all, I believe, intertidal, essentially. So, or subtidal. So, in terms of land containing shellfish, you are proposing to do some dredging to get to the depth that you need to do. Your shellfish survey, which since the last time they were formally here in front of us, does include survey behind the bulkhead, showed minimal shellfish in the footprint of the proposed project. It is something that, with some shellfish mitigation and some seeding effort, especially I could see coming back to the state or improving the state that it's in within 1 year, which is the state standard that you have to get back to the state that you're in roughly within a year of the project. And I think that it could be potentially enhanced. For salt marsh, the salt marsh that is behind the current bulkhead has been substantially degraded especially over the past several years, because most in part, I think, because of the integrity of the bulkhead isn't what it used to be. Has a lot of holes in it, and a lot of material from what I've witnessed happening on the site is coming out from behind the wall and destabilizing the marsh. So by rebuilding the wall and rebuilding it a little bit more landward where there is not current marsh vegetation, and then replanting roughly 500 or so square feet of marsh, I think will be a benefit to this area. And minus the upwellers, anybody who owned this property, I would think, would want to be replacing this bulkhead anyways. So minus that, I think that's one part of the project, and then the upwellers are another. So to me, you've met the performance standards for the major resource areas that you're doing temporary, and in one case, permanent impacts because of the new bulkhead. Then going into the variances. So you're requesting, technically you did request 3 variances, and that depends on how the commission views definitions of certain things primarily. So in my opinion, and again, it can be up for debate by the commission and everybody else, but in my professional opinion, upon reading many times our bylaws, our regulations, doing my own research, you only need 1 variance in my professional opinion, and that variance is for unavoidable temporary and permanent impacts to land under the ocean, land containing shellfish, and land containing shellfish twice. Impacts would happen to remove the old bulkhead and rebuild with a new one, and there would be temporary impacts from dredging. After a lot of thought, I do not believe that you need a variance, because I agree that with the definition of float, according to the town, is so that, the purpose is so that people may access the water, or access a vessel. The purpose of these, and I agree with you, they are farm equipment. They may look like a float, but their function is not what a float's function is. I don't think they meet the definition of float. So that being said, I don't think you need a variance from the size or the seasonality. It does say in tidal waters, they are to be seasonal if they are in fact floats, but my interpretation is that these are not floats. Let's see. When we talk about mitigation, anybody is required to do 4-to-1 mitigation for new structure within a resource area, as we talked about, and you are offering some marsh restoration, and as well as you said, shellfish seeding and the nitrogen removal. So I think it would be helpful to quantify the seeding that you're offering as mitigation. Just a comment there. I think it's good that you're reducing the pilings. That's less impact to things. I have my notes all over the place. Let me look at this. But I did put in my review to the commissioners that if you feel the need to get council input as to some of these more, as the definitions of what is what and whether variances should be requested or needed, haven't done so yet, but I'd be more than happy to ask council for council's opinion on some of the more legal matters pertaining to this. And just to keep in mind too that whichever way this goes, any activity of commercial nature in the Herring River will need to go to the Board of Selectmen for approval as well. They'll need to get
We
a
understand that.
license. So I'm just reiterating it for the commission and people in the audience, so those are my comments.
Thank you, Amy. Let's get comments or questions from commissioners, starting with Wayne.
As far as the issue goes with I don't think a variance is needed either. I'm not a lawyer, but by reading the definition and realizing what you're gonna do, people aren't gonna walk across the marsh on a walkway to get there, so To me, that is not necessary. As far as the river goes and the commercial aspect of it, I grew up very close to that river, and from a young child, I fished, hunted, played from the jetty all the way to Hinckley's Pond, all through my early life. And I remember seeing a lot of stuff. The river was used for cranberry bogs. They dammed it up for water for the bogs in the upper part of the river. Way back, and I've read in the history of Harwich book and some of the other historical books, that in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they used to cut marsh hay off the upper marsh area. And they actually would make shoes for the horses so they wouldn't sink in the mud when they dragged the wagons out there. I remember the fish shanties down there, Bushalakis and Fan Wixons, and they used to have the weir fisheries out there, and they'd bring trap boats in and unload the fish and truck them off. In the 70s, they had a very large eel fishery going on. And so there's been a lot of activity there in a commercial sense, and I'm fully, I'm all for this project. I think it's great. I'd like to see it happen. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Vivian?
I know I can't vote, but I can comment, right?
Yeah, so Vivian was not present for at least 2 meetings, so she's not eligible to vote, but it is okay with you if she comments,
I have no objection.
or questions, yeah.
No, I don't, you answered the question about had made a note to ask you about the nitrogen reduction, but you explained it then subsequently. No, my only comment is it looks pretty straightforward, and I would agree with, what Wayne had to say, Mr. Colson, so that's it.
I would mirror what Mr. Colson just said. I'm in support of the project. I can see a lot more positives than I can negatives. That's all I can add.
Sophia?
I also agree, and thank you, Amy, for your take on the variance. I think that's reasonable. I think it's really nice to see a year-round traditional industry that has a benefit to the environment, so I really appreciate that. Sounds good.
Okay, I have a few comments and questions. I mean, I support Amy's conclusion that a variance is not required. I do somewhat object to the parsing of words and concluding that the meaning of people, that the phrase in there that refers to people accessing water-dependent structure doesn't apply here. I think it probably does. I don't really agree with that. I'm in favor of the final result here. It's just getting there is giving me a little bit of trouble. So I have one question, and I've seen references to people questioning what an upweller is, and I'd like to hear a clear statement of exactly what the meaning of a upweller is, because some people, I think, conclude that it's a mechanical device submerged in the water. I don't think that's what it is, but I haven't actually heard you say that.
I'll summarize from what Dan has told me. An upweller can be in the water like this with no moving parts, or it can be inside a building pumping water from the river or ocean in and bringing it back. But its purpose is to raise shellfish in a controlled manner. So this case, we're calling it an upweller because that's what the industry calls them. You're not going to go to Webster's dictionary and find a picture of this thing. But that's what the industry calls them.
Okay, you're still not answering my question in a direct way. Are there mechanical
No.
pumps involved in this process?
No, these work strictly by the water moving around them.
It's just that net
nature.
structure that keeps the scallops submerged in the water.
Right, the
That's
best-
it. There isn't something else involved here.
Nothing mechanical at all. The best way it was explained to me was a Japanese lantern, you know what they look like, hanging underneath a floating
Yeah, yeah,
device.
okay. I just wanted to
Yep, no, that's fine. You know,
clarify
I hadn't heard of them either up until recently.
that point. Okay, and I guess my concern about that area is it's very clearly, very rapidly degraded. And if it's left alone, I personally, I can see it collapsing into the water, you know, not too many years from now, which would create huge problems for the town. So I think that alone is a reason that we need to find a way to make this thing happen. Having said that, I think there are people here for public comment. I think we may start with people online. Maybe there's a letter here from, no, that's not the right letter. Okay, I'm going to solicit input from the public at this point. Okay, we'll start with Elizabeth Pyle. If you can speak up and identify yourself, please. I can't hear you. You're muted, or there's a problem of some sort. If you're talking, we're not hearing you. Well, Matt, is this a problem on our end or there?
Can anybody else in the session talk one time? Anybody?
Good evening.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe we'll move on to the next while Elizabeth Piles tries to straighten out what her audio problems are. So can we, is that Hannah Raditz? Is that,
Yeah, Hannah's with me.
oh, so Hannah, okay, go ahead, if you can come up to the
Oh,
podium.
no need to comment, sorry, I was just helping with the audio testing. I'm all
Okay.
set.
All right, thank you.
Hello?
And I just, before you start,
Okay.
and identify yourself, I just request that comments in the room and online apply to the interests of the Conservation Commission and the things that we have jurisdiction over. There are a lot of other issues here that people are concerned about, but we don't have time to air things that are going to be considered by the Select Board and others at this meeting tonight. So please keep your comments to the point. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Noreen Cahalan. I live in West Harwich. And I totally object to your saying they're not floats. A float raises with the water, goes up and down. They're floats. They've been calling them floats all along. They just changed the name in the very last submissions, and they're calling them upweller aquaculture platforms. They're floats. They have to access the floats with boats. Boats are going to be tied up to them to do the farming, to do maintenance. They're floats. They need a variance. I completely object to your saying they're not floats. So I just want to put that out there. So they should not have more than 200 square feet. They should not get a variance. The town has done a study. You're going to be looking at it later today. The Heron River, water-dependent structures in the Heron River. The town came up with this 200 square feet for a reason. There has been degrading of the environment, of the salt marsh, and the town said 200 square feet makes sense. We don't want more than that. We need to protect the river. We need to protect the environment. And now you're saying they're not floats. Well, they are. They're floats. And they should be treated that way. They shouldn't be permanent. They should be seasonal. The seasonal, again, the bottom of the ocean needs to get the sunlight for the shellfish, for everything to grow. The reason why the town has it in there that to be seasonal is important. And these floats should not be permanent. They should be seasonal. They should not be more than 200 square feet. If you look at an upweller aquaculture, like a flopsy is a upweller platform, and they describe it, say, what is a flopsy? They say it's a float. In the definition, it's a float. So these are floats, and they're more than 200 square feet. They are going to be accessed by boats. Boats are going to pull up to them. That's a float. So it shouldn't be permanent. It should be seasonal. And there is a season. In the Heron River, there is a commercial shellfishing season. And if you look at the shellfishing bylaws, the season is December 2nd to March 31st. That's the season for scallop fishing in the Heron River, because the Heron River is closed to shellfishing. And scallop, there's a season for commercial scallop fishing. So the season should only be December 2nd to March 31st. Just putting that out there. The bulkhead does need to be repaired. If they want to just put in a bulkhead, that's fine. But they're trying to put in a commercial bulkhead. If they just were replacing the bulkhead, it might be like $200,000. They're putting in a commercial bulkhead to support these platforms and floats and upwellers, and, that's going to cost like $500,000. And they say they're not going to affect the salt marsh, but they're putting in about 20 anchors into the salt marsh to hold up these timber poles that the floats, aquaculture platforms are going to be attached to. If they weren't doing this industrial farming, if there weren't these floats attached to it, it wouldn't cost so much. When they purchased the property, they knew that the bulkhead needed to be repaired, needed to be replaced. Like it's something they've known about. They don't need the money from the scallop farming to pay for the bulkhead. Upweller equipment. In their, what they presented to you as the latest plans is actually not the same plans that got approved by the Waterways Committee. The floats and the location of the floats are the same, but they changed the floats to being called aquaculture upweller platforms. And they also say they have upweller equipment. Like, I'm not sure what the upweller equipment is, but I assumed upweller equipment meant motors and pumps, because it's in their revisions to have upweller equipment, but it's not just, explained what that is. We assume there would be noise from the pumps and motors and the constant unnatural water sound. And, a lot of people, use this area. So I guess the things that I really just want to stress is these are floats. They need variances. If they want more than 200 square feet, they're asking for 640 square feet, and they should not be permanent. You need a variance for that. They should be temporary. And, if they want to just replace the bulkhead, let's do the bulkhead. Don't need any farming. So I guess those are my points. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your input. Do we have anyone else in the room who would like to speak? Yes?
I'm Mary Lou Cahalan.
Please come to the podium, identify yourself into the microphone, please, and make your comments.
Hello, I'm Mary Lou Cahalan, and I live on Riverside Drive in West Harwich, and I overlook this property on the water. And there was an article in the Cape Cod Chronicle, the Select Board approves ecological study of the Herring River. And in it, it says, in 2022, the commission sought to impose a moratorium on new structures in the Herring River. But the selectmen pulled the language from the town meeting warrant, citing the absence of public participation in the proposal. The consensus was that a study should be considered before the regulations are changed. And I'm glad that the Conservation Commission has this study going, and I guess we'll hear about it at the meeting today, too. And, you know, this is a private commercial business, and it's to make money. Of course it is. Nobody goes into business if they don't want to make money. And the study on the river shows that, you know, that recreation is important. It's important to for people to enjoy, all the people to enjoy the vision and to get out to the ocean. Everybody has to go through this small area. You know, it's not a big river. It's not like the Bass River or, you know, some of the rivers on the Cape. It's a small river. And the people who live in the area are very proud of it. They enjoy it. And we hope that we can continue to enjoy it. And I'm glad to see that there is this study going on for the Herring River, and I think that we should all be included in that and help them with what they're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have anyone else in the room who wishes to speak? I don't see anyone coming forward. How about,
I think her mic's working now. Elizabeth Kyle?
are you there, Elizabeth? Will you speak?
Yes, I'm here.
There we
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, there we go.
Good. Glad that that worked. Thank you very much. I had to exit out and come back in again to get the mic to work. My name is Elizabeth Pyle. I'm an attorney at Hill Law, and I represent concerned neighbors and abutters to this project who I listed in my letter of November 5th. And I want to speak with you tonight about this project and to answer any questions that you may have. It seems to me that the crux of the matter is whether these are floats and what definition is used to determine that. And there are slightly different definitions under Harwich's wetlands protection regulations and water dependent structures regulations. So what I want to talk about is Chapter 304 for water dependent structures, which absolutely applies to this. And the definition for a float there does not call for access to the water. That is being discussed, but that is not the definition. It's to give access to a vessel. And here, these floats would give access to the scallop harvesting vessels. The applicant has assured us that access would be from a vessel, and so that is the definition that applies. The definition under 304.2 for float is a floating structure. We have that here. Anchored in position by pilings. Again, we have that here. Which is designed to rise and fall with the tide. Again, yes. And used in conjunction with a wharf, pier, or dock to moor and give access to a vessel. So all of the components are met here for the definition of a float. And I know that your conservation agent gave an interpretation, but I request that you get a legal interpretation of this from your town council, because this is crucial to determine what permits are needed for this project. And my legal interpretation is that Chapter 304 applies, and that therefore the 200 square foot maximum limitation on floats also applies. And here, you can't get around that. So like one of your commissioners said, he likes the project, but he's having trouble getting there. The reason he's having trouble getting there is because there's a block in the way, and that is Chapter 304, which they absolutely need relief from and they cannot get because there's no variance provision under Chapter 304 for both the seasonal requirement and the 200-foot maximum square footage requirement. The applicant's consultant has said that he thinks that this applies only to floats that are residential in nature. There's no language in Chapter 304 limiting it to residential use or recreational use. If the town wanted to have that in its regulation, it could have put it in there, but it didn't. And so you can't read it to be in there now. It's all floats that go up and down with the tide, and it applies to these aquaculture floats, whether you call them upwellers or farm equipment or whatever you call them. It meets the definition of a float. And this is really a situation where if it looks like a float, it acts like a float, it's a float. And where it's a float, the 200 square foot limit applies, and they can't meet that, and so you cannot approve it because there's no variance provision under Chapter 304. Now, I acknowledge there's a variance provision under the Wetlands Protection Act regulations, the Wetlands Protection regulations under your local bylaw, but there's no variance provision for the relevant 200-foot square foot limit under Chapter 304, the Water Dependent Structures bylaw. And they need both variances in order to proceed. In addition to that, the commission cannot act on this proposal because it violates the State Wetlands Protection Act on several fronts, but procedurally, you cannot act on this because you do not have the permission of my clients, David and Linda Kelleher, to remove a portion of their property without their permission. And that is what would happen if you move the bulkhead back. So under under the regulation 310 CMR 10.054A, in order to do work on any land, you need the permission from all of the landowners before the application is filed. We're already too late for that. They filed their application. Procedurally, the only thing they can do is go back to the drawing board and refile. And in any event, you certainly cannot authorize them to do work on the Kelleher's land without their permission. A postcard showing what may or may not have been the case and speculation about it is not enough to override the property boundaries that are shown on the plan and surveys that are shown on the plan, which show removal of a triangle of my client's land without their permission. So based on that alone, this project is dead on arrival. And we do not give permission for that. We have noted again and again that we are concerned about wave deflection impacts, that there's been no construction drawings or detail provided to us, that they have not addressed wave impacts in the velocity zone toward our property from storm surge. And this is important criteria that they have failed to provide to us. And we're not going to go chase after them. We're here. Give us the information and then we can see. But right now we need to protect the Kelleher's property rights. And the commission cannot make them go away by allowing work on their property without their permission. That is unheard of. And then finally, with regard to the standards for salt marsh, our consultant, Scott Horsley, has a different opinion than the applicant's consultant. And you need to take both into account, where both are submitted to you, where moving the bulkhead back will just result in more loss of salt marsh behind the bulkhead because water will get in there and scour, and moving the bulkhead back will ultimately just lead to new scour behind the new bulkhead location. The best thing to do would be to repair the bulkhead, keep it in its current location, and restore behind it, but that is not what's being proposed. And as a result, the applicant cannot meet the state protection standards for salt marsh, which require that any work on a salt marsh or within 100 feet of a salt marsh, which would be the case here, cannot have any adverse effect on the productivity of the salt marsh. And you have our consultant's letter in your file saying that it will have that. And based on that, there is no way for the applicant to show by clear and convincing evidence that it has met the standard for a variance, and there's no variance even allowed under the State Wetlands Protection Act. So it just doesn't comply with the standards, and you'd be looking at an appeal. So I've laid out additional grounds in my letter. I think I had at least 8 points about why this application is deficient, why variances are needed, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but if you have I would urge you to get an opinion from town council about what variances are required and how to interpret them before you proceed with this matter. And that would be the thing to do to ensure the community interests are representative here, where so many people in the area are concerned about the interests that are at play here, the environmental interests, and the impact on the salt marsh and the impact on the recreational use of the river. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So a question maybe to Amy, maybe to the applicants. Can you verify the claim, the statement that is being made about doing work on an abutter's property without agreement from the abutter? Can you respond to that, please?
When we first started, or shortly after this started, Jeff met with the abutter, and the conversation, on secondhand, you can say it if you want, but the secondhand discussion was, as long as it ties into my seawall, it's fine. There's about a foot space, which is like one piece of sheet piling that's gonna be pulled out of the old rotten one, because it touches his metal one, and the new one put back. If that requires a whole new filing, it's a little beyond me. I've done lots of seawalls where there's always a mesh, there's a little mesh going on here.
Well, wait a minute. The abutter apparently has hired an attorney who is claiming that the abutter has not given their permission. So you can say whatever you say about a handshake agreement, but if there's an attorney involved who's saying they haven't given their permission, don't we have a problem here?
It's certainly sticky. What we could do, we can not go over that property line, and then he'll have a 15-inch gap between his seawall and ours, and an old rotten piece of wood between it. We thought this was agreed a long time ago.
Okay, my opinion here is I agree with the attorney, we can't proceed without that. And furthermore, there's an attorney here who's making a bunch of statements about how there is no way we can approve this right now. And you may agree, you may disagree, but I don't think it serves anybody's interest for us to just vote approval here, because there will be litigation and it will be a mess. I think we have to straighten this out. I think we have to run down these things. I think we have to hire, town council, or get town council involved and run these issues down and straighten them out, because I don't think anybody's gonna be happy if we don't do that. Neither the applicant, the town, nor the abutters and other neighbors who have issues with this. So my feeling is we need to wait. We need to get input from town council and see how we can proceed. I've said my piece. I don't know if there are more people, if there are questions for Attorney Pyle, or are there other people who want to make comments here? But if there are, is there anyone else online or in the room who wants to make comments or ask questions? Amy.
I'd say after hearing everything tonight, I completely agree with you, that we need to get council input before we can move this farther, because there's some issues here that really aren't completely our strong suits, because they're more legal issues than they are necessarily wetlands. I mean, there's certainly wetland stuff too, but I would agree, and we could continue to one of the upcoming meetings. I just think it's wise to have that information before you take a vote.
So how much time do you think we need? When should we continue to? When would you be agreeable as the applicants to meet again? But if we're gonna be consulting town council, then we need to take whatever delay is involved there as well.
Yep. I would be hesitant with the holiday coming up to say that we could be ready for, that it would be ready for December 4th, which is our next meeting. With the holiday in there, I'm not sure that that could be made and have the opinion available for the applicants and the abutters and everything in enough advance of that December 4th meeting. So the meeting after that would be December 18th, which is what I would suggest, but it's up to the commission and the applicants.
Any comments?
Just a couple of small things. There was a statement that there was a triangle of land being lost by the abutter. Absolutely untrue. This is going back in the same place that the bulkhead is, where it is right now. We have attempted to reach out to that abutter to figure this out, and we haven't had any response. So we're a little bit, we could be stuck here. Our option might be to put a return and then leave that 1 foot space there. That's sad state of affairs to me. But I hear what you're saying, and let's see where it goes.
I'd like to suggest that they reach out to me directly. They should reach out to me and not to the Kelleher's. The Kelleher's are represented by council. Please reach out to me.
Okay, that's beyond what the commitment, that's beyond us. Thank you. Anything else? I'm gonna make a motion that we continue this to, what's the second meeting in
December 18th.
We continue this hearing to December 18th, 2024.
I'll reluctantly second that motion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5 and 0. Oh,
Four.
4 and 0.
Four.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you very much for your consideration, and happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Thank you all
You
very
too.
much.
Next, we have a notice of intent for 117 Riverside Drive, map 4-A1, parcel A11, to construct a single-family house and pertinent site work.
We'll just give people a minute to clear out.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay. You ask ahead of time, no, we can't, sorry. If you, actually, if you get it, if you ask me to put it electronically, I can do that ahead of time. Yeah. Chairs work good. Chairs work well, that's, thank you.
Good evening. I am Bob Perry, my company's Cape Cod Engineering, and working with Amy and Alan Delaney, who have a keen interest in moving to Harwich at 117 Riverside Drive. So, spent some time working with them to take the house that they've developed and see how it best works with the parcel that we're working with. And what we have is a kind of a triangular shaped upland parcel that's got quite a bit of salt marsh off to the south. It is subject to wetland regulations with respect to the coastal bank and to the riverfront area primarily. The land was previously used for some informal trailer storage, and I think when it was a single parcel, there was a dock established there. And the dock wound up on the vacant parcel. And the plan before you shows the home proposed as far back as you can set it. It's 86 feet from the top of the coastal bank. That's actually a portion of the coastal bank that's not eroding. The remainder of the bank that's moving is, we've looked at two plans, one prepared 2018, 2019. This is about a third of a foot per year here, as far as we can tell. So we have a post-1996 residential parcel. Therefore, the riverfront regulations limit the proposed degraded areas to no more than 10% of the riverfront area on the lot. We have quantified that for you both in the narrative and on the plan. We have 513 square feet of the home and patio incurring into the 100-foot buffer zone, but we are well clear of the 50-foot buffer. So we're just under 10% with the riverfront area proportion, and that includes a portion of the driveway, the walkway, patio, porch, and the home. One of the interesting things in your regs about the various mitigations is I know that you require 2-to-1 in the 100-foot buffer, but I believe that I'm true in telling myself and you that we have a 2-to-1 mitigation in the riverfront area. Is that
In the outer riparian, you have a 2-to-1 requirement, which is what you were in.
in the outer? Thank you. So we're in the about 9,100 square feet of mitigation department. I spoke to Amy about how that could be worked, since we have a vacant lot that does have available room on it for approximately 7,000 square feet of shrub area recovery. And the remainder would, I know there's some off-site options, and we'd have to explore that with you to discover whether you would prefer more off-site mitigation, or if you're comfortable with a split where we can get, approximately 7,000 square feet of area that it has grasses on it, but it's devoid of shrubs. And that area can be planted with native plants, what looks happy here, a huckleberry and northern bayberry. There are several pine trees, one in particular that is out a little bit slightly beyond the work limit. It's about 18 to 24 inches in diameter, and it's close to being a tree that could affect the home. But in the course of discussing the mitigation options with you, we wanted to talk about that tree, and we wanted to talk about the off-site, on-site split that we might have to have. It is for that reason that we did not prepare a mitigation plan, because it wouldn't make any sense to do that until we had agreement from you that which way you'd like us to go. With respect to the coastal bank, there's really no adverse impact that's going to result to the wetland interests there. The land actually slopes slightly up or is level, so there's no runoff potential. We have typical Harwich outwash plain sand, so infiltration rates are good. But we are proposing significant and effective roof drainage. So it's a residential project. It's very well tailored to meet the river front area performance standards. And I see quite a bit of that, and I think this is a good project with a lot of circumstances that lend themselves to protecting the interests that the Rivers Act intends to protect. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have and to talk about the mitigation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, a couple of things. I think this is another one where we're gonna talk a little bit about definitions of things. As I fully delved into this project, I kind of came up with more questions than answers. So, the lot was created fairly recently, definitely after 1997, when the Rivers Act went into place. The Rivers Act regulations are in our 310 CMR 10.58, which I instructed you folks to read. And as you read it, to me, it's fairly confusing as to words such as degraded and activity and work and alter. And all those things are important because they all lead to how much activity you can actually do in a riverfront area that is on a new lot, a fairly new lot. So I reached out today, and I have something to give you as well. I reached out to Whitney McLeese over at DEP. She's a Southeast Region person now. And asked her, regardless of the address of the property, on a lot that's that was made after 1997, how you interpret some of these things. So what she said to me, and she has it written out nicely here that I'll give it to you. Work equals activity. Activity means a lot of things, but includes destruction of plant life and changing physical characteristics of the land, which you are proposing to change some physical characteristics of the land. Alter includes destruction of vegetation. Where this all kind of leads is that according to the Wetlands Protection Act regulations, I'm led to believe that you can only disturb, and not just with hardscape and structure, 10% of the riverfront area on that lot total. That would include everything within your limit of work, is how I'm reading and how she explained it to me. So right now, and it'd be something I could further vet. I know we're talking about another meeting anyways, but according to her interpretation, your entire project and the work, which includes clearing the work, anything within the work limit, can only be 10% of the riverfront area on that lot.
Okay, so if I'll speak to that. We have traditionally, and I know that different generations of regulators interpret things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Even in 310 CMR 58.4, which is this is the primary performance standard,
Mm-hmm.
temporary impacts were necessary for installation of linear site-related utilities are allowed, provided the area is restored to its natural condition.
Mm-hmm.
We have, in our experience in the Wetland Act, alter has always been affecting vegetation. Always. It's right there. It's right
Mhm.
there in 310 CMR 10.1 or 2. And this riverfront area isn't that. It's just my opinion, based on my understanding. The riverfront area deals with development and degraded areas. And if you have a collateral disturbance of affected vegetation, but you restore it to a natural condition, that's not in the calculation. Now, you're saying something different. So that would be severely different from our project.
Right, and I apologize because, it's only something I delved further into more recently, and it's something that we can certainly have more conversations about, because should you restore the area within your limit of work, which most people would want as yard area, but should you fully restore that area, then you potentially could meet that definition. Doesn't have to, it's something to talk about.
Well, we certainly have to get to the bottom of that. It does,
Right.
within 200-foot riverfront areas, the issuing authority may allow the alteration up to 5,000 square feet or up to 10% of the riverfront area. I've
So,
always
yeah,
termed that as permanent.
right. I don't disagree with you, because and I think we talked about this on site, which was over a year ago, that different regulators have had, at the state level, have different opinions about things such as gravel versus pavement or something like that. Is, again, what you were talking about, permanency in nature. But I thought it was important to bring it up too, because say we do, whatever we do approve here tonight, we don't want DEP, or not tonight, but what we approve, you don't want it to be something that it's gonna easily be appealed. And I've seen, DEP appealed the decision this commission made, recently.
On the riverfront area, or?
No,
another
no,
case?
coastal bank, but, so, rather flesh, I know it's, not as early in the game as we would have liked, but I'd rather flesh this out before we go too much farther about that.
Well, I'd like to have a copy of that.
Yeah,
from
this is
DEP.
yours.
If you want to send that to me tonight or tomorrow, I will.
I can
don't need
email it,
now.
or you absolutely can have this one.
Well, thanks, Amy. Let's take a look here while we're here, thank you.
I was gonna email it to you, but it was later in the day anyways, and I said, well, we'll just talk about it tonight.
Activity, yeah. Okay. Well, activity, she's correct about that, too. The activities defined in the Wetland Protection Act. But she has not provided the definition of alteration, and she gave you the definition of activity, but she didn't give you the definition
Yeah.
of alteration. So, this is a good topic. I would say that the applicant would consider it a surprise, but we need to let you and I get to the bottom of that.
Yep.
The premise here has always been to keep it's so easy to just say, if you had a building envelope and you keep that below 10%, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never had a riverfront area case that wasn't a case of a very specific accounting of different types of surfaces,
Mm-hmm.
different types of vegetation. So it would be a first for me to have it interpreted that way. But I
Excuse me.
think,
Just by the way, there is a definition of alter at the bottom of this page.
oh, thank you. That's a big page. Let me read it. There we go. There it says, it means to change the condition of an area subject. Examples of alteration. Changing the pre-existing drainage characteristics, flushing characteristics, water levels, destruction of vegetation. Well, I agree. I think that that's important to find out if the destruction of vegetation means a permanent circumstance.
Yeah. And I think, so certainly set up a call, maybe with DEP and maybe with, an additional person from
Yeah,
DEP.
that's just a very significant.
It is very significant.
And okay, well, that's where we are. So I'm happy to take questions if you have any, otherwise
Well, we still have
Yeah.
potentially comments and questions,
thank you.
but are you done, Amy?
I think, yeah, unfortunately, I think we need these answers before we can go farther, with it. I don't, for what it's worth, I don't think it has any impact on the coastal bank, so, small thing. But we will, yeah, I can't go any farther
Okay,
at this point.
let's get comments and questions. Sophia?
I don't have anything right now.
No, and no particular remarks.
Vivian?
Nothing right now.
None for me
Wayne? No?
at this
Okay.
time.
So, can you clarify what the difference is here in the plan, if there were,
Yeah, so essentially,
the applicant was constrained to not disturb anything outside of
so what the applicant has proposed for, as what they're saying, impacts to the riverfront area is 4,557 square feet. But that would only account for essentially structure and hardscape in that area. The question is whether clearing essentially of that area for utilities, I feel is different, but just clearing of other area within the limit of work, whether or not that is supposed to count as well. So the area around the structures, if you will, is what we're talking about.
And maybe the question is, if the applicant, one possible solution, although it's not clear, would be for the applicant to agree to restore everything around the new building to something approximating its original
For
condition.
a native community.
A completely
Entirely native vegetation, yes.
Yeah. And I know when we met on site that is your,
We talked about
that is
that.
what you want anyway. It's similar is what you want anyways, is to have a low-maintenance native area. So I remember that. So there may be a way to accomplish that.
Alan mentioned to
Yeah.
me a second ago the general practice for how, I mean, obviously, this isn't the first riverfront area residential development that you have seen. It's
Right.
not the first for me.
Yeah.
And there's many others in other towns under the same jurisdiction.
Yeah.
The difference with Harwich is that Harwich requires mitigation for riverfront area development that the state does not require.
Right.
Your standards are much higher.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a benefit to the buffer zone that would not be realized under the state law.
Yeah.
Something.
And I can certainly look at, I don't know if we've had a similar case where it's a new lot with a, that's never had a house on it, but I can certainly look and see. Or ask my counterparts in other towns as well. What's there and what's been essentially approved by DEP in similar situations. I think that it's a new law is throwing it off a little. So I apologize
Well,
for
it's
the
either
lateness.
5,000 square feet or 10%, whichever is, I think, less for the pre. No, whichever's greater.
Yes, but
For the
if it.
pre-96, but because we're just 2019, I think
Yeah.
it's that new.
Yeah, it's new.
But we're strictly 10%.
Right, right, and on, pre ones too, it's to improve upon existing conditions if it's a previously degraded and your lot doesn't meet the definition of degraded, so.
It has a dock on it, and it was cleared.
True, that's true, yeah.
Yeah, we
but-
didn't want to go there
Yeah.
because it seemed very straightforward to be
Right.
where we are.
Right.
but
Right.
I'll have to get the question answered.
So have you calculated the area between the limit of work, the property bound, and the 200-foot line?
We've only provided numbers for the physical alterations, not say the limit of work. No, but that's significantly larger.
Maybe double.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I think it would be helpful if you had that number.
Oh, yes, we will certainly have that. It wasn't germane until 20
Sorry.
minutes ago.
Any public comment? I don't hear any public comment, anything more from commissioners. So we need to continue. Question is,
Try for the 4th to keep this moving, to have
Yeah,
have discussion.
We'll get over this hump.
Yes,
But then we do need to speak about mitigation. I can talk with you
Yep.
independently if you don't mind
Yep.
that.
that's fine.
Okay. So we would request that continuance.
all right, I'll move that we continue this matter to the December 4 meeting.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
5-0, thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
All right. Now we have a request for determination of applicability for 108 Brooks Road, map 12, parcel S7, to construct a detached garage with living space above.
Good evening. I'm Rick Ferrari with Down Cape Engineering.
Hopefully, we will not be discussing any definitions in this matter here. So we've got an accessory dwelling unit that the property owner is looking to add to the lot. This property is within the flood zone. That's the only resource that is germane to this project. All wetlands and watercourses are greater than 100 feet from this property. So this structure is going to be essentially a drive-under garage. So that complies with the flood zone, foundation walls up to the design flood elevation with living space above that garage structure. And then a separate on-site septic system. It's going to be a pressure dose septic system that meets all Title V and Board of Health requirements. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
There's no questions on this one for definitions. So the only wetland resource here is flood zone, which is AE 11. They're pretty close to being at flood elevation on the current lot. They're proposing a new structure and a new septic. Looks like the garage is probably gonna have living space above.
Yes, that is the idea.
Yep. That is height and whatnot, have no purview of us, just foundation. So the top of foundation would be at a 12.1 elevation, with first floor elevation being a foot on top of that, so they meet FEMA and building code requirements. No utilities could be below elevation 11. If there was a crawl space foundation, you would need vents and
Yeah, it's
whatnot.
just slab on grade.
So
for the
slab
garage.
on grade. So with that, I would recommend approval with a -2 determination. Technically, it's within a resource area, but the project would not have an adverse impact. Also condition that no fertilizer, pesticide, or herbicide be used on the lot in the flood zone. None appears to be currently being used anyways.
Okay. Wayne?
I don't have any questions, it's pretty simple.
No questions?
Mark?
Oh, very straightforward.
Sophia?
Nothing for me.
I have a question. It's about definitions. It's a drive-under garage.
So it's a garage with living space above the garage.
So you don't mean it's open, you just mean,
So it's an enclosed garage structure with the living space above it.
nothing else. Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion for a -2 determination for 108 Brooks Road, map 12, parcel S7.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have a request for determination of applicability for 88 Brooks Road, map 12, parcel T4-6, to demolish and rebuild the garage with storage space above.
Hi, I'm Kathy Demeyer, owner of Encore Construction for the Finnegans. They had a tree fall on their garage last year, and the garage is deemed unsafe. So we need to take it down and build a new garage with storage space above. It is in the AE flood zone, and we have met all those.
All
Any
set?
questions? Yep.
Amy?
Very similar from the other one, but this one is attached to the home. As Kathy stated, the existing garage has been damaged. They wish to demolish what's left of it and build a new one. And storage space above, it seems. Yep. It's a disturbed flat area. Again, it's just barely within the flood zone. All utilities would need to be above it. Similar, recommend -2 determination. Not gonna have an adverse impact to the area. Also condition that no fertilizer, pesticide, or herbicide be used in the flood zone. Again, nothing is being used that I can tell. I would like to say, the tree that was likely the culprit, at least of a limb of it, it's just outside of, it would still be concerning to me, and I think a couple members of the commission noted as well. I would like to say if the permit could include flush cutting of that really large oak that's close to the home, should the owners want to do it, so we don't have this problem.
definitely.
All set, Amy?
Yep.
Sophia?
No questions.
No questions.
Okay, Bill, Wayne? I have nothing. Can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, for -2 determination for 88 Brooks Road, map 12, parcel T4-6.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Okay. Next, we have a request for change in plan for 29 Walther Road, map 16, parcel T7, SE 32-2557.
Good evening, David Clark Engineering on behalf of the Walsh family. We were here earlier this year. We got an order of conditions to demolish the existing dwelling and construct a new dwelling. And the Walshes are proceeding with getting building permits, and I think I stated at the time that we were pursuing a change in the FEMA map for the property. But because of pending changes in the Wetlands Protection Act and more importantly, changes in the building code, we felt it was prudent to get permits then, then see what happens with FEMA. So we were successful in getting a majority of the property out of the velocity zone, and that allowed us to, or the Walshes, to redesign the house. Some of the impediments of developing within the floodplain, especially the velocity zone, limits what you can do, primarily no basement, and it also prohibits changing of grades within the velocity zone. So this revised plan shows the new resource area. The velocity zone has been pushed way to the south, almost to the top of the coastal bank. Again, a majority of the property's been removed from that particular resource area. We still have the 1,500-foot buffer zone to the coastal bank. So what I've provided are site coverage calculations for that 1,500-foot buffer. What was approved under the previous plan, although it was not published on the site plan. We were dealing strictly with alterations within the floodplain at that time, but I did do a second site coverage based upon the previous plan. So overall, there's a reduction in both the 0 to 50 and a reduction in the 50 to 100 over what was approved last time. So the benefit is of removing the project from the floodplain was also reductions in the site coverages in the buffer zone of the coastal bank. To correspond with that change of the floodplain, Blue Flax Design revised their mitigation plan. The initial mitigation plan that was part of your approval was based upon 4-to-1 mitigation for increases in the floodplain. When we were almost done with the permitting process, Amy told us we got that wrong, and that the floodplain was not considered a resource area where that 4-to-1 standard applied, but we left it as part of the permitting package that we got the order conditions for. So now with the new Blue Flex design, looking at what's required for mitigation in the total buffer zone, there is a net increase in site coverage from what was existing, or what is existing, of just over 800 square feet. I believe Blue Flax is proposing 3,000 square feet of mitigation, so that's in excess of 3-to-1. for that net increase. So we're asking for this to be approved as a plan change. We're actually a little bit further away from the resource area. We've reduced site coverage in the 0 to 50, which was one of the sticking points the first time around. That we were, although we were decreasing in the 50 to the 0 to 50, Commission had asked if we could get it all out. But there's some portions of that 0 to 50 that we can't remove, like the bulkhead and the stairs over the bank to the beach. So really, the only, other than that, the only structure we're proposing is a fire pit that's very close to the 50-foot line. That's it.
Thank you.
So I mentioned that Mr. Clark could come in as a plan change because what is currently being proposed is even less than what we've already approved, farther from the resource and less square footage of hardscape than what you had already approved for this plan. As you stated, while we recognize flood zone as a resource area, we actually don't have a mitigation requirement for it. Under our regulations. So when they had proposed 9,000 square feet of mitigation earlier, it was technically way more than they had to. That being said, so they're still offering more than the 2 to 1 that is required, more like a little over 3 to 1, and of mitigation. And it's gonna be an improvement to the site. The house that's currently there is well within the 50-foot buffer to the top of bank. The new house will not be. Yes, there will be a fire pit there, but more importantly, there'll be more of an enhanced buffer strip. There's not a whole lot of habitat and species diversity on the site, and this will assist with that. So I would recommend approval of this plan change.
Okay.
This looks like a good deal for us. I'm happy with it.
No questions?
I have no problem with this. Any public comment? Hearing none. Can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the change of plan for 29 Walpole Road, map 16, parcel T7, SE 32-2557.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have certificates of compliance. First is 49 Snowin Road, map 15, parcel N2, SE 32-2479 for the reconstruction of an existing pier, ramp, and float with dredging. Amy?
So this came on our agenda for assertive compliance, and there was a couple of questions that I had. Then I know there's representation for the applicant here tonight on this. So some questions that I asked is we approved a 3-foot wide pier, and it is 4 feet wide. The order specifically calls for it to be 3. Then they can speak to that, the walking width of the pier is 3 feet, but the entire width, including handrails, and deck boards extending out to the pilings makes it 4 feet wide. They did get us their Chapter 91 license, so thank you. They sent over photos of the marine railway that's been replanted. Length of structure is correct. We do not need any more information for the dredging. Thank you for just alerting me that the contour lines reflect, our accurate representations. And you clarified that there's no lateral access stairs, to be completed, which to me is fine. It just means that if you had to put them, there was more disturbance to the marsh. So I think the only real topic for discussion here is the width of the pier and what the intention of the order and what the intention of the plan was. And if somebody from Ty and Bond, maybe?
Yeah, that's correct. My name's Ryan Kavanaugh. Good evening, everybody. I'm here representing Brian Higgins. Yeah, the deck boards extend 6 inches beyond the edge of the stringers. The pier width is still 3 feet by the stringers and the interior of the piles. The deck boards just extend 6 inches beyond the edge stringers on both sides, leading to, that 4-foot width.
So the commission our typical piers are a total of 4 feet in width. I think this one was unique, in that we had assumed that it was only gonna be 3 feet wide, but our typical ones that we typically approve are 4 feet. So, because of that, I don't particularly have an issue with it, but that is up to you.
Comments from commissioners?
I don't have any comments on it. It's pretty simple.
Vivian?
No comments.
Oh, I don't see any problems.
Sophia?
I'm with Amy.
What's
I'm
that?
I'm with Amy.
I have a little bit of a problem here, but I have a question, which is what is the height to width ratio? Width to height ratio.
That's a good point.
And my other comment is, I think it's irrelevant whether the walking width is only 3 feet, because where people walk isn't what the conservation interest is.
I understand.
It's the total cover.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care whether the walking width is only 3 feet. It's the total width of the decking that counts.
Mm-hmm.
And if leaving it at 4 feet leaves less than a 1.5 to 1 height to width ratio, then I think there is a bit of a problem here. And I don't know why we approved 3 feet and not 4 feet. I don't know if anyone can answer that question.
Don't remember, but I remember having a discussion. Ryan, do you know what the height to width ratio is here? Actually, it's not, it's only a very small section that's over salt marsh, which is where it requires 1.5 to 1.
I can take a look. If I may, could I share my screen just to show you a quick sketch, just to show the extension of the deck boards on the approved section?
Yep. Hang on 1 second. Matt, can you share the screen, please? Thank you.
So although it does extend outside the edge stringers, it is still within the piles. It does not extend beyond the extent of the piles. So I just think that this section might illustrate what I'm trying to convey a little bit better.
Still, I don't get the relevance. I don't care what it extends with. The point is what is the total width and what is the effect on the underlying salt marsh? So what is the height of the dock
Yeah.
there? Is it
Let me
shown
get
on
it.
the plan there?
Yeah, let me get it. So in the area of the salt marsh, the elevation is around 0 NAVD 88, and the deck height is 4.4 on the approved plan. So that's a little over 1 to 1 in the salt marsh with the 4 foot width.
So I imagine that's why we insisted on 3 foot width.
I would have to go back and look. at the tape from that meeting. I do recall the previous one being very low to the marsh, the previous dock that was there. I'd have to go look at the tape in the minutes.
Comments?
Question, how many lineal feet are we talking about?
Over the salt marsh or in general?
The 4-foot width that we're discussing, how many lineal feet is that?
A little under 50. 49 and some change.
Okay.
So the approved plan does show the piling, and it appears to show the decking should be on the inside of the pilings, not extending over. Or partially.
Any other comments? I'm not in favor of approving this because it's not what we approved before, and, I don't think we should go along with it. But if someone wants to make a motion to the contrary, we can
I guess,
deal with that, or we can,
I guess I'd like to go review the tape and the minutes from that meeting before we vote.
okay.
I would put a motion on the table to approve this. And I would like to include that what we're discussing here, as I understand, is approximately 25 square feet. And my method of thinking is very simply, there's going to be more damage to the area to make any correction than there is to go forward. I don't see the benefit to that.
Is there a second to?
I'll second that.
So, discussion. I don't see how, I have discussion, I don't see how shortening the boards is gonna damage anything aside from getting a little sawdust in the salt marsh. Okay, I don't think they have to rip the whole pier down to comply with this. But, that's my comment. Any other comments in discussion? There's a motion and a second on the floor. Further comment?
If 4 feet would have been acceptable before, I mean, I don't see any big issue with this. If they went over and made it 4 feet, even though it's not technically what was proposed.
4 feet would have been accepted if they were 1.5 times the height to the salt marsh.
6 foot high.
Oh, I see.
It was 6 feet high.
All right.
And we, we went through a lot of wrangling, getting to that point, not specifically for this case, but in
Yep.
general, insisting on a 1.5 to 1 ratio of height to width in order to minimize impact on the salt marsh. So I'm just not in favor of rolling over on this. Further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining on this.
Okay, opposed? Aye.
Motion
So,
does not carry.
motion doesn't carry.
I just feel like I don't have enough information. Like, I don't remember
Yeah.
offhand what the scenario was, like, and also I feel like what's the solution? Like, is it just shrinking that area over the salt marsh? Is it mitigating some? Like, I don't.
I guess it's something that maybe, Ryan, we can chat about, what the options would be, if there's a way to keep the integrity of the walkway, but just removal of some of the decking, that's kind of overhanging, that's past the rails.
Yeah, that sounds great. Is it possible to request a continuance while we discuss that, Amy?
Is this subject to continuance, just approval?
Yeah, we don't, it's, we can table it. We technically don't
Okay.
need a formal continuance, but we can table this to December 4th.
Perfect.
No, we don't need to move, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Next-
you.
Next is a certificate of compliance for 1 Zilpha Road, map 6B, parcel H2-1 SE 32-2399, for completed bulkhead and mitigation plantings. Do we have?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Dennis Moran with Ty and Bond as well here, looking to request a COC for this project. Amy did provide some feedback specific to this project about some outstanding items that have not been addressed. So based on that, the comments that Amy provided, I don't think that this project is ready to be closed out. So I will circle back with our client to discuss some additional plantings that needs to be completed, as well as some invasive management that needs to be taken care of. So at this point, I don't even think a continuance is appropriate, but maybe remove it from your agenda going forward, and we will circle back with the property owner and then come back to you. Not sure if you have anything to add to that, Amy.
Yeah, may I make suggestions?
Sure.
So this was a bulkhead rebuild and mitigation plantings. There was to be a native vegetation strip, and they were to discuss what that was gonna be with me prior to doing anything. They didn't, and they put in rugosa rose, which is an invasive, minorly invasive, non-native. So it's not something that we would have approved. So I suggest that, my suggestion is that they're going to have to be removed and replanted with natives. That could be a mix of some potential native roses, like pasture rose, Virginia or Carolina rose, but we would like to see, and what I would have articulated to them if they had reached out, would be that I would like to see a mix of a few different species there and not just one, along the top of the bank. And it does appear that they have a monoculture lawn, and which is not in compliance with special condition number 4 about no fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. So there needs to be conversation regarding landscaping practices in general on their property, and I can certainly help direct them to doing things in a different manner that are more in line with our regulations. So I say we could table this, but I think the commission's gonna wanna hear, it remains in non-compliance, so I would like to hear some feedback within a month. I think that's from the clients.
I will be happy to reach out to them and see what their path forward is.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a certificate of compliance for 48 Arbor Road, map 15, parcel T2, SE 32-2412 for vegetation management.
So I think Teresa Sprague from Blue Flax is probably, was on before, if she's not now. So this was for,
There is, indeed
there she is. I'll just state that we visited the site on numerous occasions, and it appears to be in substantial compliance. Sorry, something carried over in the, my site visits. There's no concern about that. So, some of the plantings are well established. The bank is kind of hard to establish, because it's subject to some erosion. The property owner did actually plant more trees than the approved plan, with additional 11 eastern red cedars. So I would recommend approval of the project. And Teresa, if you have anything to add.
No, I don't have anything to add other than the property owner did plant a number of additional eastern red cedar trees. So that has definitely improved the site. We are in discussion with her about ways to handle some of the bank erosion issues that are happening there. So we will be coming back and speaking to you further, Amy, and we'll be coming back to the commission with a plan to manage bank erosion on this site. So something that we are certainly working on right now and is definitely of concern to the property owner.
Okay. I'll move to approve the certificate of compliance for 48 Harbor Road.
Second.
Comments?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. So then we have a certificate of compliance for 0 Snow Inn Road, map 15, parcel N8-B, SE 32-2475, for a timber pier, gangway, float, and dredging on Witchmere Harbor.
So this one too, there's just there's some outstanding issues. They were supposed to have removed the old stone steps down the bank to the dock, and they replaced, are to be replaced with an above, with a wooden staircase, which they do have, but the granite steps are still in, and so that was a concern. And then part of the project was removing a broken section of outfall pipe, and they removed the broken section, but they were supposed to install riprap. If it's not needed, then I don't think we should be requiring that stone be added around the existing end of pipe. But I wanted to hear from the engineer on that.
Sure, thank you, Amy. You had one more comment in your email about the post-dredge survey.
Oh, yes,
as well.
sorry, yes.
I think that was included. It's the last page of the packet that was submitted.
Oh, I apologize if we didn't see that.
Yeah, I didn't know if you didn't mention it because you forgot to mention it or you were able to find it.
Nope, let me look.
But either way, that was included. So, and I would agree with you that the granite steps are still in place, but the additional riprap in the area of the outfall pipe, it was determined that it was not needed, and just to promote a more natural environment, was not installed.
We do have the post-dredge survey, so it seems like the outstanding item is the steps that are still in grade, and unfortunately, I can't recommend a cert until those are gone and that area is replanted.
Sure, I will reach back out to Mr. Evans and
But
let him know that that needs to be removed.
how did the commission feel about that?
Well, let's hear from commissioners. Anybody, Wayne?
Yeah, it'd be fine with me to check it out a little further and see if it's needed or not. It's pretty simple.
A bit more information.
I would agree.
With you? Yeah, I think there's agreement.
Yeah.
That we should wait.
Yeah, so this one, because if you remove them, planting would have to be in spring at this point. We'll just table it, and the family has always been pretty good about communicating with me, so if you just, again, communicate what your intent is to do in the spring, that would be helpful.
Understood, I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, have a great night.
We're getting there, almost done.
Now we have orders of conditions. First, for 23 Shipshaven Road. Is it Shipshaven Road, Lane, Street? Road.
Just call it Shipshaven.
Map 12, parcel Y3-10, for garage removal, additions, septic mitigation, plantings.
This was on your table this evening, as well as in your Dropbox today. I want to take 2
Okay.
seconds.
Give me a few minutes.
Yep.
Okay, so the minutes from the last meeting refer to a Japanese euonymus
Oh,
that we suggested should be removed. Shouldn't that be part of the
I
order of
can add that,
conditions?
sorry, yes. Add removal. I haven't heard back from them if it was one.
Well, Mark said it was, so I think that must be what it was.
I don't remember now. I know it was some kind of euonymus, but I don't remember which one.
I will add that to the order.
Right, whatever kind of euonymus it is, should be.
All right.
They're all invasive. I don't have any other comments. Anybody else?
None from me.
No, not for me.
I'll move that we approve the order of conditions for 23 Shipshaven Road, map 12, parcel Y3-10.
Second.
Wayne wins.
Yeah, with the addition.
We get
Oh,
some
sorry.
buzzes
The
here.
anonymous.
Get buzzes.
With the unanimous
Sit
addition.
around in your
Anonymous
chair going like
euonymus.
the, what's that show?
Okay, discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, 5-0. Next, we have an order of conditions for 2 Rebecca Road, map 57, parcel A1-1.
I'll move for approval on that order of conditions when you're ready.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Hold on.
Wait a minute. Hang on, We'll hold for discussion.
So I put some very specific conditions about meeting with me prior to doing any of the planting. Things need to go, where things are gonna go, what, and also, adherence to the manure plan unless the Board of Health changes it. And, yeah.
We all set?
Mhm.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Next, we have a violation, 10 Harbor Road, map 8, parcel S1, for unauthorized tree removal. This has been continued from October 16th of this year.
Good evening. For the record, sorry.
Nope, go ahead, Sean.
Go ahead.
For the record, Sean Riley with Ty and Bond. Angela Tanner from Crawford Land Management is with me. We had to continue this hearing from earlier on as I met with Executive Landscape and Crawford Land Management. We really struggled to try to find a location for the 3 white oaks. And white oaks, we did a little bit of research, and white oaks have a better chance of surviving within the environment of salt spray and inundation. So that's why we're proposing the white oaks. So we actually looked on 3 different properties that the homeowner owns to site those 3 oaks. And the homeowner and I met with Amy. The homeowner has taken full responsibility for the removal of the oak and the 2 cherries. And if I could share my screen, the discussion was basically that the oaks were decayed, and he met with an arborist, and
Matt, can you let
He
me share the
removed-
screen, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
We submitted the photos within the package of the oak and the decay of the oak and the 2 cherries, the limbs were withered. So he apologizes for not following the procedures and protocols and is willing to work with the commission to mitigate the removal of those trees. We found 3 locations that we think are best suited for the white oaks. We've also put into the proposed mitigation plan 6 eastern red cedars that are also on property within that lowland area. And we think with this mitigation, we're hoping that that will suffice for the commission to see fit for the restoration of what was done. We tried to site the oaks in the area where the existing oak is. Unfortunately, the slope is very steep and the root balls are very large, 3 to 4 foot diameter root balls. And with basically a 1-to-1 slope, it's almost impossible to get that root ball to take on that slope. Half of it would be exposed or half of it would be buried in either scenario. So we looked to put these in positions that we felt had the best chance of survivability. And that's why we also included additional trees, the eastern red cedars, on top of what we're proposing for the white oaks. In the image you see here, all the orange are the previously proposed trees as part of the house project. So you can see that most of the property has already been taken up with trees that were proposed by Crawford Land Management. So we feel that this is a good solution and are opening up to any questions you may have.
I would agree that this would mitigate for the work that was done without permit. Cherries are regrowing. Hopefully the oak might, the big oak might do that too. But the replanting of the 3 oaks and the addition of eastern red cedars, I'm in agreement with. Just so the commission knows, the owner has paid the fine as well. But more importantly, we're putting, it's gonna take a while for them to get to be substantial, but they are putting trees back.
Thank you. Sophia, comments?
Looks good to me.
Mark?
Yeah, I guess I'm okay with that.
Only question I have, you mentioned, the big oak stump is gonna stay in the ground?
It is.
If that
Yes, it
grows,
is.
so they're gonna take care of it and encourage it to grow?
Absolutely, and that's in Crawford's letter, and part of the submission that we are going to encourage the sprouts to grow.
Good.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have no comments, except it looks like a reasonable plan to me. So,
So I think the motion would be to approve of this as mitigating measures for the violation.
so moved.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Hearing none?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. All right. Now we
Thank
are
you.
at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good night. Okay.
Now we are at discussion and possible vote on Herring River study,
Yeah.
which we all have read and reviewed, I assume, hopefully. So, do you want to?
Sure, I'll introduce it and can start the discussion. First of all, there's no vote on this tonight. This is a very, very initial discussion on the first draft of the study that we had commissioned. And just to bring it back a little bit, the direction that we were given at town meeting a couple of years ago was before making any bylaw changes for activity on the Herring River, that the commission should try to quantify what impacts, if any, water-dependent structures are having to the various wetland resources of the Herring River. So we took that to heart and we spent the better part of a year coming up with the parameters for this study, and received input not only was from this board, but also from professionals at Barnstable County level in their respective fields. And I think, turned around quite a good proposal. So DRC company was the successful company to receive that contract, and that was based on qualifications and what they proposed to how to address the study. So we have that here in front of you, and they will be coming to future commission meetings when we have an official public hearing on this. This is really just to introduce it to you, what they've done, to receive your questions, comments, and feedback, so we can hopefully come up with a final draft of the study that they can then come and do a formal public presentation for everybody. So I have read it. I have several questions and comments. I don't know if you want to start with me or not.
I think we should start with you because I'm not sure
Yeah.
what
So-
comments others have here, but
Yeah. So, I guess one of the things that stood out to me was when I looked at what our request for proposals and how that was written versus the product that we were given, there were some things that I feel could be really strengthened. We had them do a literature review. That was great. We had them, and that included not only studies, which there's very few similar studies, but also looking at the recent past 10 years of docks and piers that have been, or water-dependent structures, not just docks and piers, could be bulkheads too, in the river, and look at their shellfish studies that were done on them as well. So I guess I felt the study was very strong in its analysis of salt marsh. They were very descriptive of how they monitored the reviewed the salt marsh and potential effects. So I feel like salt marsh was pretty well covered in here, and as to potential effects on the salt marsh. What I was hoping would be a little bit more in-depth would be their study of shellfish in and around these water-dependent structures. And I was under the impression that they were going to be doing new surveys in and around said structures, and they didn't. They did a visual inspection, which all you're going to see are shellfish that live above the, like, oysters and mussels. You're not going to see quahogs and any soft shells or anything like that. But I am wondering if it's the way it was worded in our proposal, how clear it was. So, let me see. Yeah, it said identify and provide quantitative measure of invasive plant and invertebrate species. Those aren't invasive, sorry. Let me look at this real quick. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe it was, and I haven't heard from Brad, who was a previous member of this commission, works for Division of Marine Fisheries, and wanted to have a conversation with about this. He did get the study. I guess I was expecting a little bit more from the shellfish study, and that was my overall biggest concern here. I think there are ways where they could explain or not project, but display the data in a more understandable fashion for some of these things. Some of the graphics are not, to me, completely easy to understand, and if not easy for maybe me to understand, then somebody who has no, substance, or, you know what I mean, background in this, might find it harder. And I felt like their conclusions and recommendations were a little bit on the slim side as well. That's it on on the study. I'm just interested in what you have to say, and so I can give them some constructive feedback.
Do we have comments, questions? Wayne?
At this point, I don't have much to say because I haven't looked at it that close, and I need to study it some more. There's a lot to it.
There's a lot to it.
For Cranberry Grove, there's a lot to it.
For anybody, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, there is. I'd like to look at it again, I skimmed through it. I agree with you about some of the, I don't know if it's because I have black and white, or if the color would probably help.
I can
but
make printed
it's
copies
just-
for you
it's-
all.
There's a
Even
lot
with-
of,
Even with color,
I don't think it's,
some of
yeah,
it's
yeah, I suspect, even with color.
a little hard, because they don't, they can fix that part. They can explain some of those diagrams a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not, which they should do.
And then, I did have one other question, and I can't find it. Sorry, can you come back to me, please?
Mark?
Not at this time. I don't have anything to say about this yet.
Same, but I will.
You had a mountain of information to look at for the whole of tonight's meeting, so I understand.
We're not quite done yet, so.
Don't worry, we will. Don't worry. I'm very interested to hear what people have to say, so.
So, I need more time with this.
Yep.
But part of what jumped out to me is their comments about their statistical analysis, which they had made promises in the proposal about fancy statistics, principal component analysis, and something else, I forget what it was, but the problem with their assignment is it's inherently a small sample size.
Yes.
I was always a little skeptical that they would get something meaningful out of a method that requires, pretty big numbers. I mean, not artificial intelligence size numbers of data, but still more than like 20 or 30 sample points. So it was always going to be problematic for them to come up with some meaningful statistics. So they resorted to some simpler things, and I guess I'm still thinking about their simpler things and how meaningful they are. But they drew some conclusions about their observations, specifically about salt marsh.
Yes.
But then they put all kinds of caveats on those conclusions because they weren't, it was hard, again, it was about sample size. They didn't have enough samples to really draw meaningful conclusions about, like, what the cause of salt marsh, apparent salt marsh degradation, either under docks or adjacent to docks. They observed pretty conclusively that was what was happening, but they weren't willing to commit to why that was happening. Was it just leftover construction effects from the newer, monopile or newer designs that would eventually resolve or not? And they weren't willing to draw any conclusions about that. Was it because of a location on banks, and the location next to a bank was causing the degradation? So I'm disappointed that there aren't stronger conclusions out of this. I'm just not sure about salt marsh, that is, and I'm not sure what there is to be done about it. I think they can at least be pressed a little harder for, you know, drawing more definite conclusions about some of these things.
And better describe the potential confounding variables, you know? That maybe impact, that could also have something to do with the conditions. I agree, I felt it was a little weak. So, but if it was meant to be that way, or if it or not, that's something.
Well, so one of my questions is, I mean, they took data points, they did transects and quadrats, which I think that's referring to things that are,
Quadrats are meter squared frames, essentially.
okay, I'm
But
not up on the,
It's okay, I don't, the words.
jargon, but, I mean, you look at the diagrams and they're very, you know, there's a couple data points at each of these things. So one of my questions is, why didn't they take more samples like in the salt marsh? Why was it only a couple of samples in the various places where they took salt marsh? Because at least they would have had more data points to maybe have a little more reliable statistics about these things.
That's a good point.
And the business about not a lot of shellfish data, which is also disappointing, and I didn't get a chance to go back and look at the RFP to see whether that's a flaw in the RFP.
It might be a
or not.
flaw in the RFP.
But, you know, that's one of our major bugaboos. Which it's disappointing we don't have something more definitive about that. Those are my comments. If we have no further discussion, there might be someone in the room who wishes to speak.
Hi, Noreen Cahalan, West Harwich. I got a chance to review the study a little bit. And on page 29, conclusions and recommendations, the second paragraph there, first full paragraph. Given these observations and inherent limitations, our conclusions is that negative effects of water-dependent structures can be best mitigated by minimizing structural footprint and siting structures in portions of the waterfront parcels that are least impactful to salt marsh resources areas and shellfish habitat. So I think that's pretty pertinent, minimizing the structural footprint. You know, that's something that Harwich is concerned about and has in the bylaws. And the 200 square feet of floats is, you know, why we have that as a rule, a law. So I just thought that was very interesting. You know, earlier we were talking about the Heron River, a proposed scallop farm, and they were talking about more than 200 square feet of floats. You know, this is a study that, you know, we spent a good year coming up with parameters for. They spent a good year doing the study, coming up with a report. I think it's something that 11 River Bend, you know, should be considered.
We can't talk
water-
about that hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just think the mitigation of the structural footprint is very important for water-dependent structures, be they floats, docks, piers, in the Heron River. And I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? There will be a public hearing where
It'll be advertised in the paper,
advertised, you will
and I know
have-
that you're interested, so you and I have communicated via email, so I'll make sure I send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But it'll be in the paper anyways, but it's so, I'm not gonna schedule this for a certain date yet, because it sounds like we have to have a little back and forth with some questions and with the consultant.
Yeah.
But try to review it, a little bit more in the next week or so, and if you have further questions and comments, email them to me so I can get them to them. Good news is that, so they gave me some examples, and I didn't want to have it tonight because I knew we had so much of examples of how the GIS, they developed some GIS layers, and because we do have, well, we don't have a very robust GIS system, the assessing department does have ARC GIS, and the data layers that will be property specific to the data that they collected at each property can be visually represented, that we can be made public. So I will share those with you. I'm working with our IT director to make sure that that is something that can definitely be, that we can accept those layers essentially, that they'll work in our form of ArcGIS. And we'll go from there. And then it'll be up to the commission to determine, you know, there's a lot of information. What information do you is most pertinent to have on there, essentially? All of it, some of it, et cetera. So that's the next step too. So they did, actually that came out really well. So I'm excited that that will be the component for it as well.
Just as a note,
Yep.
I have GIS software, which is not ArcGIS,
Yep.
but is very capable
Yep.
software, and I would like to get a copy of their data layers.
Yeah, I can ask. Yeah.
And does Sarah have those things now, or?
The data layers? I don't believe yet.
I see. So you haven't actually, no one in
I've
town
seen
has.
example, we don't have the layers yet. I've seen screenshots of various options, and they just want to, so I can send that to you.
So,
Okay,
let's see, minutes. Got minutes.
that's it.
So I sent,
We got them. Thank you very much.
we have this much fun every time.
All the
Yeah,
time.
and you stuck it out all this time, I have to give you.
So, and it's nice that we started half an hour earlier.
We're not going a half an hour later just because. It is almost bedtime.
Oh, okay, for you.
Yes, I'm a morning person.
So there was one item in the minutes.
Yes.
That we need to talk about now, which is that the minutes say that you abstained on, which item was it?
Bonnie Lane, but you actually
You
voted
did
no,
vote against
and we changed it.
the motion in Bonnie Lane. Is that, you agree with that?
We reviewed the tape, we did.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I shouldn't speak for you, I'm just wanting to get out.
Just trying to remember,
Bonnie Lane, there was one little hiccup snafu where you felt it wasn't right.
yes.
I made a motion, and you objected to part of the motion, and you ended up voting against it, so.
Which is fine.
And it was stated as you abstained in the draft.
We
It
cor-
amounts to the same thing.
Yeah.
Does it? I'm not sure. it
No.
actually does.
Well, at the end of the day, it didn't matter. You won, I didn't, so it didn't matter.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. We did make that
Okay, all
Sherry checked it and made sure we had it right, so.
So I move to approve minutes as amended.
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Okay. Anything else?
why I can't find them, because
Thanks. Nothing
Getting a big
pertinent,
look
nothing
at her.
pertinent for tonight, and if I remember something, I'll email you that you need to know.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion, we adjourn the meeting of, what the heck is it? 11:20?
11:20.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.